Hi, everyone. We see people online. Thank you so much for spending time tonight on this very important topic. Our organization, Wildcat Health and Mental Wellness, is primarily for the parents. There are times throughout the year where we will open it up to a larger audience, whether if it's athletic space, we'll have the coaches come. If it's a different topic, the whole school is invited. So glad that you're here with us. And we've got some wonderful guests with us tonight. Angela's gonna moderate this meeting for tonight. We are here for you guys. So any topics that you want us to cover, please let us know. You have our email address, follow us on Facebook, but we gear our content to relevant topics regarding our kids, but also based on research. I'm like, hello.
This one's muted. Mm-hmm. This one's muted. Yeah.
I can hear you. Check.
Okay, try that again.
Okay, yeah. Can everybody hear okay? You can just type in the chat. Right there, yeah. Can everyone hear okay online? Yeah? Okay, wonderful. Awesome. So any topics that you have concerning your kids, anonymous, just send it to us and we will bring in speakers to cover these topics. And if you want to get involved, please let us know as well. But I'm going to hand it over to Angela. She's going to take it from here. Awesome job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, thank you. All right, now we're gonna close the chat. We're gonna get this tech stuff down someday.
You're doing awesome.
Do you know what? If people, I'm gonna do this too because I want you to see our faces and I don't want you to have this in your way. Okay. Oh, thank you so much, everyone online and everyone in the room here. After talking to a lot of students in our community, we have been wanting to do this meeting for a really long time. And we knew it was a serious topic and we wanted to make sure that we were ready to present it. And so I think tonight we're ready because these two girls really are giving of themselves to have their experiences help other students and their families. Body image is the way that someone perceives their body and assumes that others perceive them. And I think that's the really, really important part. This image can be affected by your family, your friends, social pressure, and the media. And we're going to hear a lot about those things tonight. Body image is closely linked to self-esteem, and low self-esteem in adolescence can lead to eating disorders, early sexual activity, substance abuse, and suicidal thoughts. So instead of me sitting here telling you about it, we really thought it would be more powerful for you to listen to these stories of these girls. So tonight, our first speaker is going to be Libby Anderson. And she is going to tell you her story. I'll let her introduce her. Come on up, Libby. Make sure you're in the shot. Great, perfect. These chairs are nice and high. Like
they are.
They're perfect. I'm going to let her tell you her story, and her journey started as early as 5 years old as a gymnast and becoming hyper aware of her weight. So.
Yeah, so I was a competitive gymnast when I was younger. So naturally, all the corrections that I was given had to do with my body. That was just like the nature of the sport. So I was constantly told what was wrong with my body or what I need to fix with my body. And when you kind of grow up in that sport, also the tinier, the better. And so that was also like praised a ton.
Sure.
Yeah, and then kind of growing up, being super young, I had this neighbor that their family had 4 girls, and the oldest was my age. And she was just naturally a very small girl. But she also did gymnastics, and she had a gymnastics bar in her living room and had told me that I had to be like X amount of pounds so I could go on it. Or she would like take me up into her room and see how much I weighed, and we couldn't play together unless I weighed a certain amount. And so right away, I kind of like drew this attachment to my weight and
Yeah.
my personality, or the way I was as a person. Yeah, so that's when it kind of really started.
Yeah.
I also have this like very distinct memory of like setting my Wii Sports goal weight, because you could do that on then, to like 40 pounds as like a 3rd grader.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were working on that when you played Wii?
Yeah, I mean, like it was
Yeah.
just, obviously it wasn't for 3rd graders, but I knew
Right.
at that early age, like, okay, like this, I guess this is where I should be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you go through your childhood sort of, this is kind of always on your mind.
Mhm.
And when you get to high school, is that kind of when you started having some, you know, that it was maybe becoming an issue? Or tell us about how that became an issue for you.
Yeah, like you said, I was always just aware of my body and kind of insecure. But it really started my sophomore year going into junior year of high school. I think like most people right now, and especially girls over the media, just I wanted to be healthier and like lose a few pounds and like tone up and just look overall better. So that's what I started doing. I started like going to the gym more. I was researching online. What I found online obviously like wasn't the best. It was a lot of unhealthy behaviors, and pretty soon it just kind of like spiraled from there. Once I got like a taste of it, I wanted more. A very like turning point in that process was like I remember just like being so terrified to eat a banana based on like how many calories it had in it. So it really spiraled really quickly. Around this time too, I was like having a lot of friends. I was in cheerleading and like doing really well in that. I had just became like the conductor of our school's marching band. And so I associated those positive things with the changes in my body.
So what do you think, what would you say was the driving force at that time? Was it because you thought you were getting friends and like you tell us, like, did you need, I think you said when we were talking before, you felt like you had to be that way.
Yeah, I felt like validated, and it was like, okay, well, if I stop this whole like working out, eating better, like pattern, what happens to those comments? Like, are they not going to think of me in that way anymore? Am I not going to have this many friends? Are these things not going to happen the way they are right now? So that was just like a fear in the back of my head that like this needed to keep going, and it needed to keep going more.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you also, can you talk about, because I had never heard of this before.
Yes, I can.
You were diagnosed with something called POTS.
Mhm.
I don't know if anyone has ever heard of that. Have you heard of that, Nancy? Yeah. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, of course. So it's a form of dysautonomia. It affects my nervous system. And so like heartbeat, literally basically everything you need to survive that you don't think about. And so that had a huge crossover with my eating disorder because they have similar symptoms. So like the dizziness, the nausea, it even got to a point when they were first trying to diagnose me that like they thought I had seizures. I was doing EKGs, I was doing heart scans. So I was constantly in and out of the hospital, and no one detected the eating disorder. And that kind of covered up for the eating disorder. Even though I had lost 25% of like my body weight, that was sort of like the answer. And then going through that, I was told I couldn't work out just because it would make the POTS worse. And so that was even a driving force more for the eating disorder, because it was like, oh shoot, that was a thing that was helping this. And now I can't do that anymore. So I would either one, do it in secret, or two, limit my food intake even more.
So I want to just go back to one thing, because I remember when we were talking
Mhm.
that I said, all the things, like she was really good at not eating and really good at, because she's so organized and so driven. And so like all of the things like that you're doing, I would be like, oh my gosh, look at my daughter is working out and
Yeah.
she's really healthy. And like, how can you look at this and go, like, what do you think they should be looking at? Because
Yeah.
it looked like, oh, she's so healthy and she has all these friends.
That was definitely the comments I was getting. It's really hard to like find that line. I think for me especially, it became such an obsession though. Like I was constantly in this state of like thinking about food and thinking about my weight and like weighing myself after every little thing I did. So I think that line really crosses where there's an obsession with it.
Okay. So when did you start? How did you get into treatment? Like, how did that happen for you?
Yeah, it's kind of a backwards process actually. So at that time in high school, I wasn't officially diagnosed. I kind of just saw my therapist had suggested seeing a dietitian. And so I saw this person once a week and it didn't really do much. And I thought like I was cured because I could eat, I don't want to say unhealthy, but like things that I like fear foods for me. I could eat those again. And so I was like, okay, I'm fine. I don't need this anymore. But I think that was me just trying to like hold on to this eating disorder. And then through senior year and when I got into college is when it started back up again in like full force because I started gaining weight. And I think that's because my body was just kind of like taking over and trying to take care of myself from the amount of like trauma I essentially put it through.
Right.
So I got very confused and I was on this mission of, okay, well, I'm going to lose weight in a healthy way, which I know now is like not really a thing. And so I was working out a ton. I was like lifting weights and then I would go for like a 7-mile run while all trying to eat, barely any food. And so then that's when the binging purging started. And I think it's because, I mean, just going through treatment, I know now that like the binging was because I was just so hungry. I was like spending so many calories, like my body just needed to have that food. And then I felt so guilty about that um, I would have purging behaviors. And so I got to this state of last summer around this time, actually last year, where I was just so fatigued and just I had no energy to do anything. I would just like sit there and just like cry because there was nothing I could do. And that's when I like really, really opened up to my family and started going into treatment. I went into like, I guess the best way to describe it is like a day program for 6 weeks before I could get into a residential center where a bed opened up.
So do you want to, I wanted you to talk a little bit about, you had said something about this mental game that kind
Yeah.
of took over for you,
Mhm.
because I think it's really important for parents to understand just like how does this have a hold on you and what is that really about? I think we talked about it's like about control and
Mhm.
things like that. If you can, because you said the term you used was it was this mental game of like, because
Yeah.
they diagnosed her with a eating disorder when you went to treatment and she was like, I have an eating disorder. Because even when we were talking, you were saying, well, giving me the things like, how much do you think about your food or those things? And I was going, well, gosh, I do those, I do some of those things sometimes.
Mhm.
And so just kind of give us your mindset about like when you were in treatment and how you starting to learn, what the diet stuff is wrong
Yeah.
out there and what changed in your head about it.
Yeah, I think that's a huge misconception. It's not like you wake up one day and you're unsatisfied with your body and so you start to not eat. Like it sort of just like manifests itself within you almost on accident a lot of times. Um, I like to think of it at the time and for so many of those years, it was like my best friend. It was the only thing that I was really good at. It was the only thing that I could please. I just like started chasing it more and more and more and I was successful at it. Like I was really good at it. And it like you mentioning not having an eating disorder, like I still sit here right now and be like, what? Like we're talking about this for me. Like it's like sort of like this like imposter effect. Like I thought that I was visiting when I went to residential, and like that took me a long time to get over, to try. And it's not because I didn't think I had one, but more so that the eating disorder is convincing you that you don't. So it will like, so it essentially can take hold of you more.
You're so great. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you learned in sort of unlearning the diet, weight loss, and health doesn't equal size, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think it's a huge realm that's like hard to cover. I
Give
think,
us like a few.
yeah,
a few.
I think a good example is like, I've had an eating disorder for 6 years, essentially. Not one of those days did I ever not eat for the full day. And even in my darkest like moments, was I eating 3 times a day and 3 meals a day? Yes, but no one asked me like what meals I was eating. I was eating like spinach for lunch. I would eat a half a banana for breakfast, and I would eat like vegetables and some sort of grilled protein for dinner. And so I think that's really important to talk about, parents too, of like
really good.
noticing that. And then, yeah, just in general, like health really doesn't equal size, and so many healthy people can come in so many different body types.
Sure. I think you had also said you were kind of manic about when you were eating. Was it when you were eating too?
I was such a brat, like when I was really deep in my eating disorder, because like I was hangry. I was really hangry. I just needed food. And so when my parents were cooking something and it was something that my eating disorder didn't like, I would like freak out. I needed something else, but it had to be like okay with myself. And so like that amount of control and just like stubbornness around.
Is that that was about control?
Yes, and because I couldn't take like the anxiety and the guilt if I had eaten something that I wasn't okay with.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think you also had said, I had in my notes, importance placed on food. Like, is that more just about the kind of the food?
Yeah, and I think we like often put an emphasis on like having a treat after like a birthday, or have like things hold certain hierarchies over other foods, which I feel like they all offer different things. It's just, what do you need that in that moment? Like a lot of times your body really does need sugar, and like that doesn't place a hierarchy over any other food. Like no foods are really, I like to say, there's no good and bad foods. And so I think that's what we kind of talked about.
Oh, we all like demonize certain foods, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we all do it.
Mm-hmm. And cutting out certain foods, and like not eating carbs is like a good example that a lot of people do. Yeah.
Is there one thing you want to leave with parents about? Is there like a overarching lesson, or tell us how you're doing now, and how your relationship with food is now?
Yeah, I mean, I would be lying if I told you that like I wasn't uncomfortable right now, like sitting in this tank top. Like it's still, I thought I'd kind of come out of treatment being fixed, and like that's not really attainable. I still have to work at it every day. But I think the most important part is like, I wish I could hold another girl's face and be like, you have no idea, like to just prevent it a little bit from happening, because this takes a lot of time to unlearn and to get out of.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. Thanks for
having me. And you look beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
yes.
Libby. Oh my gosh, that was great, Libby. Thank you. Okay, now we have our next lovely speaker, Lindsay Archibald. She's coming, everyone online. She's coming. We have to get across the room. Okay, this is Lindsay.
Hi.
And like Libby, body image became an issue really at a young age for you too, didn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think I even realized like that it became an issue at a young age until I kind of explored my like history a little bit more. But one like kind of event that I really remembered was that I kind of like unlocked, I guess, while I was working on myself and working on recovery, was I was in first grade, and I I was getting ready for the day with my mom, and we were like, I don't know, just in the bathroom in her bed in her bathroom, and we were just kind of talking, and out of nowhere I was simultaneously just kind of looking at myself in the mirror, and I thought I was just examining myself, but really I was like body checking and mentally measuring and all of that. Mind you, I'm like 6 years old, um and I asked her, I was like, Mom, like, are you sure I'm not pregnant? Because it wasn't the first time I had questioned this. And she's like, what? Like, she's like, no, what do you mean? Like, that's not even, like, I didn't understand how it worked, but like, she's like, that's not
Did you just
possible.
think anyone, you thought you had like a big
Yeah.
stomach or something?
I
So
think-
anyone with a big stomach could be pregnant.
Right. And because
Yeah.
that's kind of what you associate with. And I guess I just couldn't find an explanation for why my stomach particularly could have looked the way that I thought it looked. And there were many events like that in my life.
Because
Through
clearly at 6, your stomach wasn't big.
right. Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what you were seeing though.
Yeah. And I saw it like as big as like what I would imagine a kid would look like in your stomach at that age. And that's like that's kind of what I saw. And I had a lot of those events in my life, those little memories, I guess, and the small little things that built up all through like elementary school, middle school, high school, even now. And I think that kind of just summarizes like how I've kind of viewed my body, is like I've seen it in kind of like a lens. It's almost like a funhouse mirror. Like you just don't, like, I feel like I don't really know what I look like to other people. And yeah, and I don't know, I guess my relationship with food was definitely affected with how I saw my body. Yeah.
Because you were thinking, I don't like what I see. And the way to stop that is to
Right.
eat
To like
differently.
And
Okay.
and I like definitely saw a direct correlation, or like thought that there was a direct correlation between the way my body looked and the way I perceived it, with how I like nourished myself. So for example, like if I ate more or ate something I wasn't as comfortable with, I would always be like, I always felt dissatisfied with my body, even though like your body doesn't change if you eat, like for me, like a piece of pizza or something like that. It's not gonna affect it that much. But then on the other hand, if I ate something I felt more comfortable with, or an amount I felt more comfortable with, I felt more pleased and a bit more at ease with myself. Even if I was experiencing like hunger cues or appetite cues or something like that, or even if I just felt physically like drained. Yeah, and I just kind of, I think like I didn't realize that was disordered, like the direct connection between what you put in your body and how it looks. I didn't realize I was disordered until treatment.
Will you explain that? Because I had
Mhm.
never heard that until I talked to you guys about eating disordered or disordered eating, like the way what those terms are.
Yeah. So eating disorder is like a diagnosis. It's there are many different types, and I don't even know all of them, but there are so many. And but then disordered eating is kind of like, it's a bit different. It focuses, in my understanding, it focuses more on the behaviors kind of, and it's a bit more low grade and kind of like, okay, maybe like a lot of people struggle with disordered eating. And so like an example, it could be maybe you don't eat breakfast and your body kind of needs that throughout the day, and you realize that you're a bit more tired when you don't eat breakfast, but you don't necessarily correct that because you don't make that connection. That would be like an example of disordered eating, in my opinion. Or like dieting is a good one too. Whereas in eating disorder, I think when it gets to that point, it's all about like the thought process and the mental games, the rules, the just all of everything that's going on up here that translate into your behaviors and your actions. And yeah, I think that like it varies. It's definitely a spectrum. And that also makes it hard to like compare.
I want to go back really quick because you had, when we talked, you had mentioned about like maybe feeling lost in your personality. Because I wanted to like, so you're 6, like, why are you so, looking at your body and not liking it? And so you had kind of mentioned something about that. If you want
Right.
to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I think I've always struggled in general, just like grasping onto things that aren't super tangible for me or concrete. And personality is such a subjective topic. And it's hard to really define that for someone. So as a 6-year-old or even as an 18-year-old, it's hard to really define, okay, what creates my personality, what like stands me out from other people, what doesn't make me stand out from other people. And I guess like for me, the eating and the way that I held that up to such a high level in my like life, I guess, and such a high value of it was definitely a way that like I connected to my personality because I felt that it was something I could control, and I felt that it was something that like I don't know, that could be defining, that like if it gets bad enough, maybe I can make this my personality, and maybe people will see me, like literally just see me, and I won't be such a, I don't know, like I think this doc used a good word like of a chameleon kind of, because I definitely throughout my life feel like I've kind of just blended in with other people's personalities and adapted to theirs, instead of really trying to explore my own, because like like many people, I'm like a people pleaser. And I think I've always wanted people to like me, and I don't want to make people upset. And I think I've struggled with just my existence being something that might make people upset, or that I feel might like dissatisfy people in a way.
Never. Well, and I think, but you talked about how and I think Libby kind of saw this too. The eating disorder gave you that identity
Right, exactly.
of who you were and what you were doing. And like, and you get a lot of praise because people say, oh, you look great.
Right,
or,
right.
because, and so that just kind of reinforced it even more.
Definitely.
Can you talk about too, I think you said a lot of the friends that you had, you were surrounded by girls.
Yeah. So I think disordered eating is very common just among everyone, among teenagers, among young adults, it really could be any age. But I found a lot of disordered eating in my friends. And I think I noticed it particularly while I was in an active eating disorder. But it all kind of just built up, and it instilled a lot of guilt and shame around food for me. So like, I don't know, I guess one example could be like a friend is talking about like, oh, I didn't eat anything today or something like that. And that's one thing. But what I've kind of realized is it's another thing of what they choose to do about it. Like if they choose to just kind of hold pride in that, like in that state of hunger, I guess, it's kind of like, okay, that's not a healthy way to treat yourself. And whereas if they're like, oh, I didn't eat anything today because I just didn't have time, can we go get like Chipotle or something like that? Then that's another thing, because at least they're doing something about it.
Well, and I think you said, well, so and so didn't eat or has been doing this, and so you were like, oh, I'm not that bad because
Right,
that
exactly.
person's doing this. And so when you have a peer community that is normalizing it, I think everybody starts going, oh, well, I'm not that bad. And it just kind of keeps everyone escalating.
Right. And it not only does it normalize poor eating habits, but it kind of glorifies it almost. Like people almost brag about it in a way.
Right.
And I like I don't know, that always just frustrates me so much now that I know that it's such like a such an unhealthy way to look at food. But
But
Well,
yeah,
and you are, what year are you in college?
I'm taking a gap year right now,
You're taking
and
a
I'm
gap
gonna
year,
be a
okay.
freshman next year.
You're going to be a freshman next
Yeah.
year. Okay, so you graduated from
Mhm.
LHS
Mhm.
just not too long ago.
Right.
And like, do you think how prevalent, like how many, would you, how prevalent do you think this problem is with the girls? here?
Well, in the sample
Or
size of,
boys?
yeah, in the sample size of my friends, and I had like a group of girlfriends. I would say only one of them has like a like purely healthy relationship with food. And that's like out of 9, including me. And so obviously I don't know the like actual statistics of it, but it's very prevalent. It's a lot.
And so do you think that a lot of it is this sort of start of this disordered eating and they haven't developed into big problems, or do you think that a lot of people are really at that point that it's getting dangerous for them?
I think so. One of my friends is does struggle with an eating disorder now, we realize. But other than that, I would say the rest of them, it's kind of like they have their lifestyles that they've always grown up with, and maybe like food isn't as accessible for them. I wouldn't say that like it's because of an eating disorder that they're not necessarily having the best relationship with food or the best like habits with food. But it's more other contributing factors. So, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't spiral into something,
Yeah. So do you think, I know we haven't touched on it yet, but
Mhm.
like, is it just sort of the prevalence in our society with our families, with social media, with
Mhm.
like, it's just kind of how we are now that,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I would say at least for with my experience, a lot of it has been because of the society I've grown up in. Just a lot of like core beliefs that I thought were normal, and then it's hard. Like you go to treatment or you meet someone who says like, no, that's not a healthy way of looking at it. Like maybe try thinking about this or like reframing and stuff like that. And it's really hard to like break down those core beliefs that you grow up with.
right, sure.
Yeah.
Well, because if that's what you learned,
Right,
why would you think it
exactly.
was wrong?
Right.
I mean, if that's what you're seeing,
Mhm.
so, well, and we'll let the expert talk about that later. Because we don't, I mean, we're not experts over here, so,
Yeah.
but we can learn about that later, because in talking with both the girls, there was a lot of, I'll say, like, I'll say it for you. Just what they've seen in a lot of the parents, um, you know, with a lot of moms saying, I'm too fat, I need to work out, I need to eat this, or, it's a huge problem, not just our community, and I think in the world. And so I think our girls are learning these things that, I mean, it's not right. It's
Mhm.
not the right way to be healthy
Mhm.
for yourself.
Right.
Let's talk really briefly about you're entering your treatment.
Mhm.
And then you had talked a lot about what you learned
Mhm.
and what you thought. You had said perfectionism
Mhm.
and control. And both of these girls are outstanding. I mean, you're the one who did the COVID goals, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So COVID hits and she's like, oh, we have 3 weeks. Okay. And she's like, I took out my notes and I did each week, and she made her goals of what she was going to accomplish. And I'm sitting here listening to her going, oh my God, if you were my daughter, I would be like so proud of you. But then what were your goals?
They were all like weight, food, body image focus of just changing everything about me. Like anything I could be a little bit dissatisfied with, I was like, oh, that needs to go. That needs to change. Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, I would say so with treatment, I entered treatment in November 2020, and then I ended treatment on June 9th of 2021. So it's coming up. But I went through all the different forms of treatment while I was during that time frame. And I think each one added a valuable experience to me, and I learned a lot through each one. And I met like amazing people, amazing other people who were battling eating disorders, and I learned a lot from them too. But I think I learned the most about myself, kind of. Like, not only did I learn about all these things that were wrong with like society's mindset around food, but also just kind of about myself, and kind of looked inward a lot during those months, and even now. And so, like, for example, I guess one thing that we talked about was how I learned that a lot of these different characteristics that I had, I used to use in like a positive outlet, I guess, but then I started with the eating disorder, I started using them negatively, and I like goal oriented, or perfectionism, or like, oh, what's the word? Determination and hardworking and all of that. And I think it's because I felt good at it, and I felt that it was paying off almost. But at the same time, I didn't feel satisfied, so I kept going. So there's a
Right.
lot of like dichotomy.
Sure.
But I also learned a lot about complexity, I think. I've always been kind of a black and white thinker, and I've been really trying to break that down. But I think I've learned a lot about gray areas in life. And having like insight in that has been really helpful, just even in the past year that I've been out. But I think another thing I learned a lot about was like about relationships with other people. And I think that's kind of part of what was one thing, at least, that was kind of behind a lot of my like mental cognitions and stuff that were disordered. I think I felt a lot of pressure to be perfect and show up perfectly in any type of relationship, and even in the relationship with myself. And obviously that's not attainable. So it really, like, I think with treatment, I learned to break down my relationships and improve them, but also like set boundaries with them. And that was like a big thing. And letting myself the space to like honor my own feelings towards things.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it's been really helpful. And I think that's definitely a good thing that I've learned, because I mean, you're going to have relationships in
Yeah.
life, of any sort.
You know, you made me think of, we had some statistics going, and I think it said that there's 5% of women in the world that possess what we have deemed the ideal body. And so they're like, so 95% of us are dissatisfied.
Right.
Like, there's no one that can attain that. And so, like, you're never going to get there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what I wanted to, we had talked about, I said, so where was your family, during this? And you have a loving, supportive family. If you want to talk about, how, like, what the things they did and how they tried to help you. I mean, they both do, they had parents both who were trying to be involved.
Yeah. My family was a big support system. And they've had exposures to eating disorders before, like cousins and step siblings and all of that. But my mom, my dad, and my stepmom were all really great with helping me. They actually were like, as much as I tried to hide my behaviors and as much as I lied and everything like that, they kind of were able to like see right through me and they caught on pretty fast. So that definitely was helpful. And I think what's nice is that they were there with me like the whole time. Like, even when I was in residential and I was like crying on the phone because I couldn't see them and I missed them and I just wanted to like sit by my fireplace or something like that, they reminded me that like I needed to be there in that moment, and so that I could sit by the fireplace in the future and like spend Christmases at home and celebrate birthdays and all of that. so my parents and my parent figures, I guess, were all super supportive, and I feel very appreciative of that, because I met a lot of people in treatment who, like, more often than not, people in treatment, their families were not supportive, and they maybe even told them, like, you don't actually have an eating disorder, or kind of covered it up and stuff like that. It made it feel like as if it was their fault. And I think that's, or maybe even just ignored it and shoved it under the table in general. And I think that's like a big mistake that some families do, just because if you ignore it, it's not going to go away. It's just going to get worse. But I also had my relationship with my older brother grew a lot, and we were never really close in like our childhood, I guess. But he was one of the first people to really recognize the signs, because I think he was just a little bit more knowledgeable on them. And he was like, he and my therapist were like the two people I felt most comfortable talking to about things, and like who would kind of be able to ground me a little bit more when I was kind of spiraling into irrational thinking. But
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, that's good for parents to know, like the things that they can do.
right,
You know.
yeah,
Although I think, because I had asked her, okay, how are parents going to know? How are they going to? And you said to me, if they would have caught this early, it would have had to been in the first 1 to 3 weeks. And like after 3 weeks, you were
I was pretty
fully into it.
Because I think for me personally, like, it's not for everyone, but for me personally, I once I get an idea, I guess it's hard for me to let go of it. I'm kind of stubborn, and it can be pretty hard for me to let go of things. So with that determination, again, once I started like thinking of even using a behavior, it was like, okay, I'm going to at some point, and nothing can really stop me. So really, as a parent, I think when it's different for everyone, obviously, and but I think the best thing that my parents did was just supported me throughout it all, and they didn't ever blame me for any of it. They knew it wasn't my intentions to hurt them, even though they were hurt. They did go through trauma with it. But yeah, I think that's the best thing that they did for me.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Lindsay.
of course, thank you, and thank you
Thank
guys for
you.
coming.
Oh, no. Thank you both for opening up and helping everyone, because I think this is a good part of both your journeys,
Mhm.
because it's a continuous journey, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
Okay,
so
thank
much.
you.
Okay, so next we have Melissa Caraba, and she's our expert here, so I'm going to give her the floor.
All
Let her
right.
get in her frame here. Make sure you're in.
Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Carava. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor and a certified eating disorder specialist. I've been working with eating disorders literally my whole career, so it's all I've pretty much ever done and all I foresee myself doing. I have worked at all levels of care, so inpatient, residential, the day program, night programs, as well as outpatient, and worked with adolescents and adults all the way up to 65. So have really seen the impact of eating disorders on individuals throughout the lifespan, and the impact on, of course, the families too. So I'm happy to be here to answer questions and kind of just talk about whatever's really
Great.
needed.
We're really happy you're here too. So we've heard from Libby and Lindsay about their eating disorders, and a lot of the issues I kind of wrote down, like the things that stuck out for me, that led them, that kind of they had expressed were the things they thought that made them do those kinds of things. And to me, a lot of these things are the things that lead adolescents down path. I mean, insert to do drugs, to a promiscuous life. I mean, I think it just really depends on, what is going on with the kid. So we had written like no connection to personal identity, low self-esteem, perfectionism, overthinking, need for outside validation, and a comparison to unrealistic ideas. And like, to me, that was just like social media, right?
Social media, I mean, as much as it's got its benefits, right? It certainly has its downfalls too. And I think that you know, what our youth is faced with right now is that it's in their face all the time. And it's growing. So what the current research has shown is that individuals that are between 13 and 17 are using, their most used app is actually TikTok, which shouldn't come as a surprise, I think, to some of you. But you know, what we're seeing is that social media is just blasting them with information, and it could be these reels that are on, you know, TikTok or Instagram or whatever, and they could be 15, 20 seconds, but they're getting an extremely strong message about bodies, about self-worth, about, you know, popularity, all sorts of things that can, you know, kind of lead to ideas of like, well, how do I change things so that, you know, I'm well liked, or my body's acceptable. So you know, I think one of the biggest things that I think could be helpful with our kids is to help teach them social media literacy. And it was really interesting this past Friday. I actually went to a talk on it and really got some good ideas about how we can teach our kids that. And I think it is something that, you know, as parents or people involved in, you know, organizations with the kids, that we help them see how what they're consuming on social media does impact self-esteem and disordered eating.
So when the girls were saying, oh, they went to treatment and they learned all this stuff, and I kept thinking, and I mean, they have fabulous families. Like, how are we not getting this outside of treatment?
Yeah, good question.
You know, like how do we get these things into our kids?
It's, you know, our westernized culture has just moved so fast. And I think that throughout all of that, you know, we've all sort of missed out on some of the things that these lovely ladies have been able to gain through treatment. I mean, even through adulthood, there's people who are learning some of the things that they've already learned,
Sure.
which is, you know, extraordinary. I think that what I'm learning in terms of working with, you know, young people and even people in older age is that what we're exposed to at home or in our immediate communities, whether that's extended family or neighborhoods or, you know, circles of faith, it's important that our kids are validated, are heard, are seen for who they are, and that there's not a lot of expectations about what they're supposed to perform, what they're supposed to put out there, or what they're supposed to feel. And I think it's hard because we're all human and we don't like to feel yucky, right?
Yeah.
Even with my son, you know, there's times where if he's crying or if he's upset about something, like, no, don't, like, let's not, right?
Right.
It's like, oh God, this is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Even for me as a therapist, I'm like, oh, I don't want to feel that, right? Nobody
Right.
wants to feel that. And so I think sometimes we send the message to our kids that, you know, let's not be upset about that, or it's okay, or, you know, we'll problem solve it. Don't worry about it.
Or we
right?
go, oh, honey, you're sad. Let's go get ice cream.
Stuff like that.
Right? Like, or you were saying there's celebrations. It's like we use food. I was doing something I was nervous about today, and I went in, I didn't want to do it. And I went in the kitchen and I ate candy, and I was like, you're eating candy because you have anxiety. Like, because I'm really thinking about this stuff right now. And I'm like, I noticed that.
Right.
And I think that we, you know, what do we say to our kids when we come home? Oh my God, I had such a hard day. I need a drink.
Right. So that's another, right. So it could be food, right? It could be like, oh, like you're not feeling well, like let's do this. Or some parents are like, oh, you're feeling anxious. Why don't we go on a run together? Right. Which, in most cases, running's not a bad thing, but it's how we're using food, how we're using movement, how we're using alcohol, how we're using even distraction like TikTok. Right. So like, it's being really aware that really anything can become problematic if we're avoiding our emotions instead of leaning into them. And as parents, we sort of have to learn, how do we do that? And how do we allow our kids to do that in like a safe space?
Okay. Well, that was one of my questions too, was like, how do we talk to our teens about emotions? Because I've done a lot of stuff about, you aren't your emotions, that, and so I don't know if you can talk a little bit about, how it's things that are just happening. And
So how do we talk to our kids about emotions? I think it's showing interest, right? Of like, if they're home and they're angry or anxious or, whatever, it's just like, okay, what are you feeling? Like, what's going on? Like, tell me about what's happening. And instead of like jumping to how to problem solve it, or like, oh, no, don't worry about that, honey. Like, it'll work itself out, or that sort of thing, that we look to attending to the emotion and validating. And validating is so difficult because I think inadvertently we tend to validate sometimes like off the mark. So for instance, if, someone were to say, these kids just don't like me at school, right? Like, oh my God, like, you know what? Of course they like you.
sure,
Right?
we've all said that.
Totally.
Of course
Or
they do.
yeah. And it's just something that comes up, right?
Yeah.
Or if, it's like, oh, well, don't even worry about them. Like you can find new friends or whatever it is. So we try to validate them to make them feel better, but it's not actually validating like, wow, you're feeling like people at school just don't like you. That has got to be like so lonely. I'm so sorry that, you're feeling like you're left out by your friends, and maybe you really are left out by your friends. Like that's extremely hurtful. Like leaning into emotion like that is going to actually open up our teens and open up our kids to be more receptive to then hearing what you have to say next, whether it's just sitting there with them with it, whether it's finding out how they can make different friends, or whatever is appropriate, right? And by validating our kids' emotions, we're also opening up the door for them to share more with us, which I think could be helpful in terms of like body image and eating disorders. Is like, if they feel safe to talk about some of these things, perhaps that's a way that we can really step in before things escalate to another level.
Okay. And we talked a lot about, we were alluding to, it's a peer situation and the friends that they hang out with and all of that. And I had written down like, be curious and ask questions. And I kind of related those two things because I felt like if you really knew their peer group and who they were hanging around with, because that's probably who's influencing them the most.
Yeah.
Do you find that like, is that an indicator usually of like, is that a good indicator for a parent to kind of have the temperature of what is happening in that circle? And then,
oh yeah, I think that the parents who are really involved in terms of like knowing, the kids in the group and like what's going on there, do have a better temperature in terms of like, well, here's what my teen's being faced with, whether it's everyone's on different diets or not. And not to say that it's going to change anything that's happening within the group, but that you can help better support your teen with that sort of thing, because they can then talk to you about like, yeah, at lunch today, literally everyone just had an apple. And so I came home with basically my lunch because I didn't want to eat it, and so then there's that dialogue to talk to their parent about it.
so this is kind of a different, so I have a son who hates any food and it's junk and eats junk food. And I noticed like the more I pushed him, the harder he leaned into his what he was eating. And so like, I just felt at some point I had to just stop. And so I feel like with teenagers, it's so hard to like figure out, like, if you think that they have a problem, then, and they're not being receptive, like what are parents supposed to do on how do you monitor, how do you kind of follow through to see
Yeah.
like what's happening with them and really know that, or is there a way to know that?
Well, I think it's, the thing that's tough about teenagers is because they're their own people, right? Like they're
Right.
going to do what they're going to do for the most part. And so, we can't control their behavior in any way, shape, or form. It's sort of, I think if there is some way to have dialogue around, like, help me understand, like, why, you're not eating all day and then you're like eating all this stuff at night, or like, getting sort of like a better idea as to like why they're doing what they're doing can sometimes be helpful. But
The curious questions.
yeah, but then to some degree, right, like they don't want to be policed, like absolutely we don't want to be policed. And
Right.
so certainly I think it's then if your kid's not open to being receptive with you as their parent, which can happen, right, that who is somebody that they're willing to talk to, whether it's a mentor, a therapist, another adult, like something like that. You want to make sure they have a safe space somewhere to just bring whatever is going on, because you're not going to force them to talk.
Okay. We had talked about, I think this is a really big thing, especially in our community. We have such overachieving kids, but talk about validating the outcome. Not, instead of validating the outcome, we should be praising the process.
Right. So like, as these ladies have spoken to, and I think many of the teens up here are just, they're high achievers, right? They do well in school and sports and all of these things, and which is great. And at the same time, I think that we as adults, when we're saying like, oh my God, you did so great during that race, like, I'm so proud of you for getting into this college or whatever else it is, it sort of dials things down, like in terms of validation to, I'm proud of what you did and what you're capable of doing, rather than sending the message that like, wow, you worked so hard at training for that, marathon or whatever it was. I really see the effort that went into that. I'm so proud of you for sticking it through. Like, it took a lot of determination or whatever it is.
Well, because I can absolutely relate to what Libby and Lindsay said. I mean, if your daughter is looking really good, I mean, are you not going to say, oh my God, you look so beautiful? And so, but that was the validation that was pushing this.
Right.
And so it's like, how do you maneuver that?
Well, I think the difficult thing is too, when we validate it, and it's hard because of course, like when it's your child, you're like, oh my God, you're so beautiful, or you're so handsome, or all these things. And I think the thing about appearance is that when we validate the appearance and things like that, it becomes about the appearance, right? It becomes like my body is more of an object rather than a vessel for, being. And so, I think that kind of speaks to how we also influence our kids' own body image, the way that they feel about themselves, the way that they feel like they need to appear to other people or to their parents, right? I think we all can probably come up with at least one example growing up of, somebody body shaming us or body shaming somebody else. And then we sort of internalize that of like, oh, well, that's bad, right? And so in terms of that, like, I think it's important to, really stick to validating, the person rather than what they look like.
Well, and the some of the statistics that I had up earlier, it even said, and I know we've focused on girls tonight, but I do want to say that it said, I think in 1990, I don't remember the exact number, but it was, maybe like 20% of men had issues with their body. And now it's well up over, 50% or 40 something percent. And so I think, I'm wondering if that is following where our culture is just following culture.
New studies are showing just our men, they're kind of indoctrinated with this like toxic masculinity. And we're even seeing this sort of new term go around of bigorexia. I don't know if you've heard of that, but essentially it's, the boys are wanting to, get bigger, get stronger, have more muscle,
Okay.
and look a certain way that is the ideal, which is, I mean, if you think about it, like nobody looks like that walking around all the time, right?
Right.
So it's taking these boys onto paths where they're eating, enormous amounts of calories throughout the day. So they're thinking about food all throughout the day, maybe in a different way than we're seeing other eating disorders, but it still feels the same. It still feels consuming, right?
Right.
Or they're at the gym, or they're wanting to, again, we're subjecting the body just to like the parts and objectifying it rather than, celebrating like what our bodies do for us. So we are seeing, a lot of disordered eating, a lot of disordered exercise behaviors in males.
You were talking about when you are working with somebody and going through the process of helping them, how do you get someone to view themselves? And because they said they have these warped senses of what they look like. How do you begin to change that?
Ooh, there's so many things. I think step one is to sort of take inventory of like, okay, if somebody's seeing themselves in a certain way, where are those messages coming from, right? Whether it's about their physical appearance or about who they are as a person, right? So we heard about core beliefs, right? So like looking at core beliefs, looking at like, what do we learn about emotions? What do we learn about relationships? What do we learn about our value as a person, and also, about our bodies and what we think they look like, and the messages around that. But I think the most important work overall, and there's just so much, so it's kind of hard to touch on, but is looking at identity development. And part of that is taking inventory of values. Values are essentially what guides all of us throughout our lives to make the decisions that we want to be essentially present in a life that's worth living. And when we are able to take inventory of our values, we are also able to form more of an identity with ourselves. When we build mastery over things, so it could be something even like a meal plan, right? If somebody is needing a meal plan because, they're restricting, when they build mastery over like, I'm able to have 3 snacks and 3 meals a day and sit with that, that's huge, right? So that builds self-confidence. And there's other things that don't have to do with eating disorders, of course, where our kids can build mastery, can build skills around, improving their confidence. And I also think it's really important, if families are supportive of treatment, right, that they're inviting their teen or their kid or loved one into conversations about who they are and their values, what's important to them, what are they learning, right? Because we're showing our kids that like we're interested in you and we want to be a part of that in some way. And I think that also helps our kids feel like they have a sense of identity too.
Absolutely. When you mentioned that, I had written down, like, we talked to our son, he plays at a very high level of sport, and we said, okay, this is the arena. Like, great, if you want to do this, we love that, but you're here because look what you're learning, not the games you're winning, or and looking at, and that's what he loves. And so I was like, I think I've learned, like, we need to get our kids into find what they do love and give them a little push sometimes, because that's the arena where they are going to learn what they're good at, or what they like, or how to get along with people,
Right. And I think it's fostering like those opportunities for, growth in interpersonal relationships, like you said, or teams, or skills, arts, or even getting to know other people who maybe have struggled with similar things that you struggled with. So like support groups are really great too, because you can learn a lot there as well. Because you have like a space to have a sounding board, because not every kid is going to want to do like a sport or whatever. So we want to kind of be creative about that too.
Absolutely. was there, I know you have a handout.
I have a handout of
Okay.
just sort of some resources, like there's the values card sort on there that could help with identity. There's some sort of ideas of like, how do you build mastery, ways that we can validate our kids, ways that we can teach our kids to learn social media literacy. So if you're here in person, we have them on paper. However, if you're on Zoom, I'm
Well,
very prepared.
yeah. We will put it in the chat, and then we will also, we'll email it out. We can email the link out to our email list so everybody can have it. Even if you're here, I can email it to you too, so you have it both ways. Because it's kind of nice to have it digitally too, but a lot of really good resources. I'm trying to look over my notes to see if we caught everything. I think I love what you said about defining like your family's values, and because I think a lot of people I know, like if you are religious or whatever, like I think parents think, oh, we're in church and my kids are getting that, and I feel like, or like, I don't know too many families. Do families sit down and, make your family manifesto or, whatever it is. And,
Yeah.
and so I love that.
It's interesting too, because yeah, if you have a faith that you follow or prescribe to, right, that doesn't just automatically translate to your kids' values. Like there's like growing up, you can totally endorse whatever values have been I don't even know the word I'm trying to say, but given to you by your family or, faith or whatever. And at the same time, like personally, you're going to have your own, right? And so
Sure.
it's super important to make sure that you know what those are. And like, even as a family, kind of like talking about them. And the fun thing about it is that it can change every 6 months too, in terms of like where you put it on a hierarchy. So it's always good to look back on too.
Okay. What, is there anything I missed? Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on? Or we can open up for questions.
So
if
yeah,
no?
questions are fine. Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, we have some in chat.
Oh,
Does the dissatisfaction with their bodies usually begin in childhood?
I think it's different for everybody. And it depends on their life experiences, right? Like I think, probably everybody in this room or everybody on the Zoom can pinpoint an earliest memory of, being aware of their body, right? And so sometimes it's within our families, right? And we learn sort of like what the ideal body is from our families, or we learn from our families like that they're validating whatever body we have. And sometimes, like they said, it could be from a friend, a neighborhood friend, or a teammate. So it's sort of individual in that way.
What are the warning signs that parents should be aware of if their child is engaged in disordered eating?
Okay, there's a lot. I mean, and they're sneaky too, right? So they can be pretty covert. There's so many. It could be skipping a meal. It could be skipping a snack. And I think it's important too, when you said like spinach is a meal, spinach is not a meal. Like a meal is like a grain and a protein and a vegetable or fruit and a fat. Okay, like that's kind of the basis for it. So if you're seeing things kind of getting like skimped over, if you're seeing that they're preferring kind of more like diet foods, or even not like traditional diet foods that we've known in maybe like the 80s, right? But like what more what now today would be clean eating or clean foods or that sort of thing. That's something to watch for. Weighing, exercising, body checking, which is essentially like looking at your body. So like it could be like pinching, measuring, like lifting up your shirt, all sorts of things. And it could be body avoidance. So like sometimes kids will just wear the biggest t-shirts and pants so that you don't even see their body, you just see a head. And sometimes that can be it. But I also know sometimes that's a style now too. So there's that.
yeah, I've had therapists say to me before, sometimes with teens, you don't know if it's just because they're teens or if they actually have a problem because they're teens.
Who knows?
I mean,
So I think if you have a suspicion, then, that's always something too. But those could be like some of the clues. Would you guys add anything?
maybe like, I guess like when you're talking about food and everything like that and just meals, I guess the sign could be like hiding or throwing away or like using a disposal or what's it called?
The
Disposal?
sink
the
disposal.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if everyone can hear. She was saying, watch if they're throwing away their food, like in the garbage disposal. But because then you can't, if it's not like
Yeah, you
evidence
can't
in
see it
the
in the
trash can. Okay.
Even like micro behaviors, like cutting up food into tiny little things, like that's behavior, right? Or if they won't let food touch each other, sometimes that's a sensory thing, so it's not. But sometimes there's like rituals around foods, like timing around food is, something too of like I can't eat until after this time or before that time or whatever.
They had, yep, you guys had talked about that.
It seems like just from talking with you guys that it starts out with healthy intentions. You want to be healthy. And so you start with exercising, a regimen, watching what you eat, and then it becomes, and tell me if I'm wrong, like an obsession. Is exercising part of it? Because I'll sometimes see, how you can develop a regimen and then all of a sudden it's like, no, I gotta work out, I gotta work out, I gotta work out. And then we find out now, just from talking with my son about what he studies, is it does such damage to your body because it's under chronic stress. But so maybe working out.
Yeah, I mean, exercise for sure. And I think it's like, forget how you phrased it exactly, but it was like, it starts out as this like pursuit of health. And I think that's something that we also want to be aware of too, is that, health comes in all shapes and sizes, right? Health is not one prescribed lifestyle like we've been taught over, gosh, I don't know, past 100 years or whatever. It's very individual to each person. So the food that is healthy for somebody in actuality is something that is intuitive for us, right? So in what we're feeling in the moment, not just in terms of the nutritional offer, like benefit that it gives us, but emotional, because food is emotional, food is social. And so, being aware of that and not looking at like, this is the only healthy way to be. And I think it can start that way, right? Where like, I want to be healthy. And so I'm going
Right.
to exercise and eat a certain way. And by dispelling that idea that like health just equals this, can be helpful, like long-term.
So how do we set up? Because I've had this conversation with other mothers, like their daughters were a little overweight and they were like, I'm not going to say anything, like I can't say anything I don't want because they're afraid to approach them. How do you just set up this health? Like should any kids, teens be dieting
No.
or thinking about this?
Nope. No teen should be dieting. So the impact that it has, like at a cellular level, I mean, you guys spoke to trauma to the body. It is trauma to the body. It's trauma to the brain. Our kids do not need to be dieting. They don't need to be doing that in any way, shape, or form. If somebody is in a larger body, maybe that's where their body is supposed to be, and maybe we need to be okay with that, right? And I think that what's sad about our culture that I think many of us have grown up in is that that's something to be demonized. It's something to it's a moral like failing if you're in a larger body, and that's just not the case. And I know that some people would come at it with like, that means you're unhealthy, but it doesn't. Sometimes our old school medical model would say that, but like we can achieve health at every size, and that's something that again is individual to each person.
Can I go back to exercise real quick?
Absolutely.
Because that was a big part of my story, and I just want to mention that I think when it becomes really an issue is when that is like taken away. Like, well, what if they miss a day or they take a rest day? Like, what happens then? And then also mentioning like, sorry, I wasn't like train of thought here.
Like, can they even like skip the workout to go out with their friends, right?
Or how many times have you heard someone say like, oh, I just had a big meal, like let's go work it off and take a walk? Like that is, I think, really like unhealthy behavior, or saying And then like the one really important thing I just want to mention too is, I would say, don't look for weight changes. I think that's a big indicator of that is this, perceived. I think the statistic by National Eating Disorder Association is like less than 2% of people who have anorexia are medically diagnosed as underweight. So a lot of times that if you just see someone that looks healthy in your mind or your eyes, could really be struggling. I remember going into treatment and I saw someone in a very large body and they had a feeding tube. So I think there's just like really strong stigmas around
Yeah.
what a person with anorexia should look like. That's not really true.
100%. I mean, I can't tell you how many
Thank you.
clients that I've served that are in larger bodies and society would deem it as, you know, oh, this person restricts food, but in fact needed feeding tubes because they weren't eating hardly anything at all. So I think that is something to be aware of. That's a good point.
Excellent.
Another question. Can you speak about misnomers about how eating disorders present, i.e. can be anorexic without being underweight?
Agreed.
Well, so meaning like, I think what it like in terms of what do eating disorders look like or how else they can look other than like the textbook definition?
I think it's sort of what you were just saying.
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I don't know if the people online could hear what Libby was saying. I hope they could.
I just typed it in.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
good.
Just paraphrased.
Oh, perfect.
Excellent.
Okay.
Good job.
Any other questions? Is there something that, what I was mouthing to was your home?
Oh, sure, I can share that.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, it's, okay, I put it up.
Here.
Okay.
Okay.
Ep-
Because I have
Thank
it
you
up
for
pulled up.
remembering.
Yeah,
I
but I don't
forgot.
want to end the discussion.
No, I think if anyone has questions, obviously just bring them up.
Okay, should I come back up here?
Yeah, I'm gonna make you do it on the. I want everyone to hear it.
It's not what I-
We're so informal here. Don't worry.
Okay, hi again. So this is a poem that I wrote in residential treatment. And I think it really,
Pull you in.
Thank you. I think it really encaptures how I kind of like manifest, at least in my case. Okay. My eating disorder was the best friend I ever had. She loved me, she chased me, she never left my head. She was loyal and encouraging. The first time out, I felt sure of things. You're special, she'd say. I choose you. Let's get healthy. I want what's best, okay? She told me I needed her to be skinny. Sure. What could be better? The world loves skinny girls, don't you remember? We'll cut out the soda, more vegetables, less carbs. It's a start. You're doing good, she'd shout. How about a little bit more? The scale says it's working. Woohoo, you're down a few pounds. Have you been working out? You look good. What's your secret? Come on over, she'll teach it. But then she wanted more of me. You got to keep listening, she'd scream. We're not friends anymore if you look like that. Let's take it up a notch. What could be so bad? Take it from a pro. The world loves skinny girls, don't you remember? I became homecoming queen when she was my mentor. Congrats, she said, but that's not enough to be my friend. Underweight is the new trend. Less than 900 is what you're aiming for. A 100-calorie banana is off limits, I'm sure. Because boys don't like fat girls, at least not in this world. Nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. What's another skip meal? The world loves skinny girls, don't you remember? But what happens when she takes my hair? My menstrual cycle is gone. But she gave me a new present, a chronic illness to tag along. You'll need this too, she said. It'll be lifelong. But remember, you wanted to be skinny. Nothing's better than being skinny. But eating disorder was the best friend I ever had. She befriended me at 15 and then again at 19. But to you, she was never there because I didn't look skinny enough. But I was killing myself just to be seen. But the world loves skinny girls, remember? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, of course.
Oh my God. Well, this has been an amazing discussion. That's all the questions in the chat and,
Yeah.
okay, I just want to make sure we get everybody in.
Yeah, that's it in the chat. I was wondering, what would you tell your younger selves, if there's something you could tell your younger selves, meaning we as parents, you know, we're trying to figure out, what can we do? How can we do? We'll do 200%. And sometimes we just got to get out of the way. We try to solve the problem, we insert ourselves, and sometimes it's not our place. What, if there's anything you can think of, and I don't even put you on the spot, something that you can tell your younger selves that shift things in a positive direction?
Would you have listened?
Would I have listened?
I said, would you have listened
If someone told me,
if you, like your older self told you, or did you have to go through the process?
I think honestly, I wouldn't have listened. I think there's just like that motive and societal pressure. But if there was one thing I would say, it was you don't have to do anything or be anyone. Like you are perfect for just existing alone.
I think it's hard. I think I would tell myself to just take a breath. Because I think there's a lot of pressure on yourself to, with an eating disorder at least, to like do recovery 100% and be perfect and never relapse and never skip another meal and be perfect. And if you can't be that, then be the sickest, have all the bad things, and be the most underweight or be all of this, and there's like no in between. So I would just like take a breath and don't put so much pressure on yourself, and you are just as you are right now, and focus on
Be in the present.
that.
Excellent advice. We all need to listen to that sometimes. Oh, I just want to thank everybody so much for being here tonight. I'm so glad. And thank you all for coming. I know everybody had 50,000 activities tonight, and there's still so many people online and they're catching it anyway. So thank you. We will record this as well. We will put it up on our YouTube page. So, and we'll send the link out to our email list, and you can go and rewatch it. We edit out the the technical difficulties at the beginning. So, all right. Thank you so much, everyone.